These are 5 surprisingly cheap Woodpeckers tools. Now I know cheap and Woodpeckers usually don't go in the same sentence, but I think you'll be surprised at some of these hidden gems you may not know about. And I've got an honorable mention here that's a little more pricey, but I think it's worth it. Let's go. If you'd like to check out any of these tools I showed today, links in the description and the pinned comment. Now I think the perception of Woodpeckers is that they're very, very expensive and you're just basically showing off if you have those. Now there are very expensive tools in their lineup. Whether they're worth it or not is debatable, and usually is highly debatable. But there are some that are very affordable that will provide you a lot of value in your shop. And I'm talking very affordable. And I'm fixing to show them to you. Let's go. First up, this is only $25, and this is the Woodpeckers Edge Rule, and this is the 12-inch version. Now there's a complete kit you could buy for about $100, give or take, and that includes 4 of these rulers, a 6, a 12, I think a 24 and a 36. I have the complete set, but I'm talking about the one that you'll probably use the most, and that's this 12-inch. One of the things I think makes Woodpeckers stand out is you can literally lay any of their tools side by side and all of the measurements will line up perfectly every single time. They're highly accurate. And I think a lot of people dismiss that. Plus, these are made in the USA, so that's a bonus as well. But it doesn't mean you always have to break the bank to get these tools. Now, this Edge Rule is one of my favorite and was my first Woodpeckers tool. I like them because of what they do. First and foremost, this thing will set on the edge of a board without falling off. And that's very handy, especially if you're wanting to carry that mark all the way around. You can use it like a shoulder square, just marking on the edge of it. You can carry the measurement around on the other side, marking both sides, however you want to use that. This is also perfect for finding the center of a 1.5-inch thick board or a 3/4 inch board, because one side of this ruler is 3/4 of an inch away from the edge, the other is 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. So you can just hold it on each side and make that mark, and then you can find the center very easily. Now on this 3/4 inch board, it actually has a little bow in it, so you may even see the line is off because of that bow. And because of the way this is made, this doesn't flex like a normal ruler does. So you can actually use this kind of like a story stick to be able to see where the low spots are and things like that on your boards. I personally think the whole set is worth the $100 and some odd, but if you're only going to get one, I recommend this 12-inch. It is handy as a shirt pocket. Now, one thing I will say, when I first reviewed these a few years ago now, I was concerned about the durability of it because they're aluminum and this laser etching and all that. I thought it wouldn't wear well, but no issues at all. And I keep it right here in this drawer along with a bunch of other stuff, and I've never had any issues with durability. Another thing I'll point out is because these are red on white, in other words, the white etching or the white numbers and markings on that red, it's very easy to see. Now the next one is a true pocket ruler. This is the Paolini pocket rule and one of Woodpecker's best products in my opinion. I think this is a must-have in a wood shop because it is so functional and has multiple uses you can do with just this one little tool. Now the Paolini pocket rule also comes in a set, but I actually don't recommend the set because I never ever use this 12-inch version. It depends on how you're going to use these, if you want the 6 or the 8, if you're keeping it in your pocket, like in your apron pocket or something like that. The 6 would probably be more manageable. Otherwise, I would recommend the 8. Now, there's a few things that make the Paolini pocket rule very, very special and very useful. First is this slide rule. In other words, you'll be able to set this and make repeatable measurements over and over and over, or you could scribe parallel lines or whatever you need to do with that slide rule. And another thing is, when you tighten these 2 little thumb screws down, it's perfectly square, so you can actually use that as a little small square or anything like that. On one end, you'll notice there's a tiny notch, and that's for your pencil lead to go in, which is also very nice because it keeps your pencil from sliding and moving around. Another great thing about the Paolini pocket rule is no matter if you like imperial or metric, both of the camps are fully covered here because one side is imperial, the other side is metric, and there's also an end scale on there that if you flip it over, one side is imperial, one side is metric. So there will be no complaining about why it is a metric version because there it is. Another great thing is it will stand up on its own because this thing actually is designed to do that. You can take this slide rule off and it insets right down inside the ruler, and then it can set up on its own. And that's handy if you're setting up, say, router bits at the router table, or you can use that end scale as well for setting up router bits in your regular palm router, or any router really. Now, I was really concerned about the durability of this because there's an aluminum sliding on aluminum, and I thought, man, it's gonna rub off these markings. I've had this set of Paolini pocket rules for a couple of years now, and have used these quite a bit. I just leave them hanging right there because I grab them so much, and especially this smaller one. There's no issues with durability here. I've not seen any signs of wear whatsoever, and this has been slid up and down this thing hundreds of times. It's also an 1/8 inch thick, so you don't have to worry about it bending or durability if you drop it on the workbench or anything like that. This is a very well thought out and well made in the USA tool. And for 35 or 40 bucks, this is a no-brainer in my opinion. Another cool feature I like is they put a hole in it so you can hang it on your pegboard if you have a pegboard. If you're familiar with this channel, I've recommended this miter gauge for a very long time. It's the Inker V27. It's about $80 or $90 for the miter gauge, and I think it's one of the best on the market. I wasn't aware, for whatever reason, that Woodpeckers had one. I would assume this would be several $100s based on the history of their pricing, but I was very shocked to find out this miter gauge, the Woodpeckers Stealth Stop miter gauge, made in the USA, only $119. And that includes the fence and the stop block. And I love this stop block system because I have it on my miter station. It's called the Stealth Stop. I use it all the time. I think it's one of the better stop block setups on the market. I bought the one on the saw, I bought this, so none of this is sponsored. I like this a lot and I use it quite often. So I was very glad to see that they had a miter gauge now that included this. Out of the box, there's very minimal setup here. All you have to do is just really bolt the fence on and put this handle on. And then otherwise, it's very easy. It should fit into any 3/4 inch miter slot. It fit into mine perfectly on my miter saw. One of the first things I liked about the miter gauge after getting it assembled was how it moves left and right. So when you're trying to set your angle, it's not loose where it's just moving freely, but it also isn't too stiff that it's hard to move. It feels like the perfect tension in my opinion. And when you get ready to set the angle, there's a positive stop, but the way you activate the positive stop is kind of unique from what I've seen before on others. You push this button down when it gets close to the angle you're wanting, and there's positive stops along the way. So if I'm going to set it at a 45-degree angle, when I get past 40 degrees, say I can push that button down, and it snaps in or stops at 45 because I've depressed this little button. When you let go of it, you can move it again, or you can just lock it down in place. Another feature I really like about this is that they give you a little bit of an extension fence. Now this fence can be removed, but I like having this because if you're cutting longer pieces, this gives you some support a little further out. It's not a long extension, but it does give you about 10.5 inches of extra support should you need it. Now the star of the show here is this Stealth Stop. I really like how they implement the stop system. I have it on the miter station, like I said, but the way it flips out when you need it, you can flip it down and it goes under the fence level, so it's not gonna get in the way, but you can pop it back out when you need it, and there's a micro adjustment, which I absolutely love. Now, one thing I can already hear in the comments is the way you set this with an Allen key. I thought that would be an issue on the miter stops that I have on the miter station, but it's never been a single issue. Now, on the table saw, I thought, well, there's an Allen key that you have to keep up with. You can get these magnetic trays on Amazon, and they're cheap, cheap, cheap. You can just put the Allen key in there, it sticks, and then stick that to the underside of the table saw. That's what I've done here, and now I know all the time where that key is, and I can just put it right back every single time. So that's a non-issue in my opinion, because you're not setting this like every couple of minutes. You're gonna set the distance that you want to get those repeatable cuts, and then maybe in a couple days you're gonna move it, or if you're building a project, you may set it a couple of different times, but it's a non-issue in my opinion in this case, especially if you just get the magnetic tray, keep up with it. Although I can see some not liking that part of it. If you don't want to fool with that, the Inker V27 is a good option as well. But then you're not going to have the awesome fence and stop block. Now, cutting with the Woodpeckers miter gauge was nice. It worked extremely well. I cut some 90-degree angles, worked perfect, no issues at all. Cut a couple of 45-degree angles, again, perfectly 45. And this is very easy to use, very easy to set your angles. I'm just very impressed that this is only $119 from Woodpeckers. I would have expected them to charge more for this, but hey, they did. Another great thing about this miter gauge is they have UHMW plastic underneath here that is very, very smooth, and they include a strip that you put on the bottom of this fence so that it also glides very easily on your table saw and doesn't scratch anything, stuff like that. So I'm glad that they went ahead and done that. Now the Inker also has a textured piece on the bottom that helps it slide a little bit. So I'm glad to see that also, or similar thing on the Woodpeckers. Adjusting the fence is easy. 2 little thumb screws. Just loosen those a little bit and the fence slides out, and then you can snug that up. No issues there. You can also remove this fence if you want to and just have the miter gauge itself, and you can use it just like a standard miter gauge, put your own faux fence on there, anything like that. The miter gauge also has some adjustments right here on top that allows you to adjust it inside your miter slot so you get the perfect fit. Now when we say cheap, I mean the value you get for the tool you're getting in this instance. Anyway, this is the Delve Square. Probably one of their more famous or popular tools is the Woodpeckers Delve Square. There are some cheaper alternatives out there, which I'll talk about, but this one is unique because of some of the things it does that other squares in this same footprint do not do. First, the way they built this is simply genius. This thing is one of the more perfect layout tools that I've ever purchased, and I purchased this myself. If you're doing a lot of layout, this might be well worth the price, and the price for this little square is about $60. Now I know that's not technically cheap, but if you think about everything this does, I think the value is there. You can let me know in the comments how wrong I am or how right I am, if you're with me. Are you with me? Now the Delve Square you can use in a bunch of ways. Number one, you'll notice on the bottom the blade is offset, and that is on purpose. One side will give you 3/4 of an inch, the other side will give you 3/8 of an inch, and where that's handy is you can find center of boards, especially on 3/4 inch stock. You can also lay out mortise and tenon on that with that 3/8 inch side. So depending on how you're laying stuff out or what you're wanting out of that, that can be useful as well. Also, another kind of a neat fact is that the base is exactly 1/4 of an inch. So you can use the thickness of that to set up whatever you need to for 1/4 inch. And this thinner blade is exactly 1/8 of an inch thick. You also get scribe holes 1/16 of an inch. So if you're laying out parallel lines, that might be as useful for you as well. Another cool feature is the hole that's in this is on purpose for a purpose. You can put this on the edge of 3/4 inch stock and use it as a self-centering drill bit. Drill holes perfectly in the center of 3/4 inch. So if you're doing face frames or anything like that, that might come in handy. Another cool little feature is they added measurements across the base of this from 0 all the way to 3 inches, and you can use that in the center there. You can see the 1/2 inch to 2 1/4 inch across there, so you can use that as well as a measuring device should you need that. This also fits perfectly across a 2x4, so there's that. There's also angles along the long side of this triangle to let you lay out common angles. And of course, this is perfectly square, so you'll be able to use it to square up the inside of boxes or set up saw blades or whatever you need to use a regular square for. This is one of the best. Now there's one that's very similar but not the same, and that's the DFM Small Carpenter Square. I've had this one for a few years as well. This one has a few different features, but it's not a Delve Square. I do like the DFM Square, but the blade is not offset. And all of this is 1/4 inch. So the triangle part's 1/4 inch and the base is 1/4 inch. The DFM Square, instead of 1/8 inch scribe holes, you get 16th inch scribe holes. So if you're laying out more parallel lines, this one might be a better option for you. And this one's about half the price of the Delve Square. So you don't get the self-centering drill bit hole, but you do get other holes there and a couple of pins that will help you lay out common angles should you need that. Otherwise, they're very similar. Now I know 60 bucks ain't nothing to sneeze at, but I think the value you get for the multi-use of this little tool, like it packed a ton of stuff into this tiny little thing, and it's one of the most used squares that I have in the shop. So I think most people would find this extremely valuable to have in the wood shop. Or just pick up the DFM for half the price, depending on the features you need. Now before we get to the fifth, I got some honorable mentions you'll want to stick around for. While they're not cheap, they're some of the best in the business of this tool, in my opinion. Now for the fifth thing, it's not necessarily a tool that's cheap, it's more of how to save money on Woodpeckers tools, because a lot of times we assume they don't go on sale, but they actually do put them on sale quite regularly. And one of the best ways to find these is just to go to their website, woodpeck.com. I'm not associated with them, I get nothing out of you buying something from them. I just wanted to tell you how to save money on this stuff. Click on specials, you'll see all of their deals, and what's kind of cool here is it's not just their tools. A lot of times you'll find stuff like bore clamps or any other number of tools that they actually carry, including wood that you can buy online there, also goes on sale regularly. Or if you just don't want to check the website regularly, scroll all the way to the bottom of their webpage and there's a place to put your email in. And if you don't get behind getting an email a day from them, just about, you can put that in there and they'll email you very regularly on their specials and the things they have on sale, which is a great way to save money on some very, very high quality tools. Now, no matter how you feel about Woodpeckers, there's no denying that they make extremely good stuff and it's extremely accurate. And that's one of the greatest things I love about Woodpeckers. Plus, it's made in the USA. And yeah, some of their stuff is just insanely expensive that I just can't recommend normally. But for this stuff that I've talked about today, for the prices, this stuff is absolutely amazing. Now, there's two honorable mentions here. One is pretty expensive and one is just insanely expensive, but I don't regret buying it. But it's still very expensive. First is the Woodpecker 642. This is a stainless steel version of their square. They do have aluminum versions, but I prefer these because the blades are much thinner than the aluminum version. And this 642 is my most used regular type square. And there's several features here that I absolutely love. First, the end scale here you can use to set up bit heights and things like that, which I really do like, and I'm glad that's on there. Also, because they stop the blade here on the base a little short, you're able to mark all the way up to the edge of the board when you use this square. And speaking of this little blade, this will also set perfectly on the edge of a board without falling off, and that helps you do your parallel scribe lines or just move the square along without it falling off, which I do absolutely love. And then of course, they have that indexable part, which is those basically little notches in there that hold your pencil perfectly so that when you're moving this along, it's not moving or anything like that. This is one of the better tools they make, although very expensive at over $100, like $110 for just this square. So depending on where you're at in your woodworking journey and how much you want to spend on tools, this might not be the right tool for you. But if you have the budget, I don't think you'll be disappointed in what you get with this. Although this is not cheap, so keep that in mind. This is the stealth stop at my miter station. Probably my favorite part about this miter station. I actually added this on after I built the miter station because I didn't like the T-track style stop that I had on there. And I have absolutely zero regrets about this. Now, depending on how much of the stop system you're going to use is how much you would spend. I think I paid $200 for this. I think you can get just one side or one set of this for about $50, $60 if I remember right. I'll link to it in the description, check current prices. But this, I think, is the perfect setup for miter stations because you can flip this up. It has micro adjustment and you can flip it down out of the way so it never gets in the way of your stock or whatever you're using. But if you do need to set that stop block up, you can get repeatable cuts every single time. Again, just a really great system and a well thought out one in my opinion, and I'm glad I have it on here. If you like this video, you gotta check out that one right there. I think you'll love it too. Some very nice budget friendly tools. Click in that box, get you the big old virtual fist bump.